Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast, where we talk to customers and experts about how to create products and services that feel like time well spent. And now, here are your hosts, experienced strategists, Dave Norton and Aranza Savas.
Hello, and welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast. I'm Aranza Savas.
And I'm Dave Norton.
And today, Dave, we are joined by Matt Maher. Matt is a futurist, speaker, and the founder of M7 Innovations. He has guided executive teams at many Fortune 100 companies through the ever-changing media and technological landscapes. Matt sits on the international advisory boards of Chanel and the Glimpse Group, and his thought leadership and multi-award-winning work has been featured in Forbes, Quartz, Men's Journal, Retail Touchpoints, Adweek, and more. He specializes in augmented and virtual realities, Web3, the Metaverse, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and voice technology. And one of the top trends that we see right now for CX in 2023 and beyond is hybrid experiences as table stakes, whether you're in healthcare, wellness, events, or even banking. All of our research indicates that your customers are going to expect virtual options to complement any physical experiences you offer. But what does that mean for customers' experience of tangible consumer goods? Today, Matt's going to help us look not just at the future of fashion and other physical goods, but honestly at the future of us as our quote unquote real life identities merge with and probably then separate from the real lives we're creating in a virtual world. Our goal for this episode is to ensure that all of you listening, all of you who are responsible for building innovative and future-proof customer experiences, walk away with new and clarifying ideas for readying your CX for whatever's next. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you both so much. I'm so excited to get into this conversation. I know it can get technical, but we'll keep it fun, we'll keep it light, and make it very useful, hopefully, for your listeners.
Thank you. And thank you for acknowledging how technical it can get. As I introduced you, it dawned on me that there's probably a lot of our listeners who aren't really familiar with even all the terms in your introduction. So maybe we should start there. So in the most succinct way, how would you define augmented and virtual realities?
Sure. And I'll make these definitions, again, not very technical, more real on how they're applicable to our lives. So augmented reality, at a basic level, it's basically adding a digital layer on top of the physical world. And that comes to life in AR lenses when we can put on virtual makeup, or in front of us, we can see an IKEA chair in front of us, but we're grounded in the real world. We're just adding something digital on top. Now, virtual reality is a little bit different. That's when you're completely isolated in a virtual world. So you put on a headset, 360 degrees around you. You can bounce anywhere in the world. So they're tied together by the world reality, but one is in the real world with digital and the other is completely virtual and isolating.
I love that you use reality in both of those examples, because the physical world we've often thought of as real and the other as virtual. And we've used the phrase in real life for so long, IRL versus virtual. But the truth is they're both pretty real and constructed. One is physical and tangible and the other is experienced in other sensory ways. So
and they also get muddied with mixed, and I just jump in quickly as that's where it gets tricky, because then people say mixed reality, and then they say extended reality, and then they say metaverse, which I'm sure we're going to get into. So that's what I just want to try to do, is just pull apart augmented and virtual, because especially in business sense, augmented reality for virtual try-on, product trial at scale, there's a whole business in there, whereas virtual reality is just so different. That's more in line with gaming, with social communities. So we like to pull those apart before we just mash it all together and say mixed reality, extended reality, metaverse. So that's what we'll try to do here, is distill some of these things down so we understand them.
I love that. Thank you, Matt. So talk to us about Web3 then. How would you define that?
Web3. Well, as you know, with all these crazy terms, we love to put a title on something. When AOL came out with those disks with 30,000 free hours. We didn't say Web 1 has arrived, but we were in Web 1 at that point. So what's happening now is we're kind of looking back and categorizing the internet, if you will, and saying, okay, well, Web 1 must have been the AOL, the MSN, the Yahoo's broadcast internet. And then Web 2 was where the internet really matured. And this was the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Pinterest. You could have a community, build a website, sell a product, and the internet somewhat centralized. And then Web 3 came along that said, hey, centralization, maybe we don't like that. We want a decentralized internet. It needs to be safe. There inherently comes the problematic terms, because even as Web3 starts to pop up with all these new companies like OpenSea, the largest NFT marketplace, which we can get into, or Coinbase, the largest crypto bank, they're inherently already centralizing and becoming monopolies in each one of those Web3 facets. So it is really hard to actually define what Web3 is, because if you call it what everyone does, the safe, decentralized internet, it's not that right now. So what it really is a promise of what the internet could be one day. But we're not in Web3 right now. And probably what we can discuss is we'll be in Web 2.5 for probably the next decade.
That's a really helpful distinction there. I also think that for so many of us, we're starting to hear these terms be more pervasive and starting to question what it means to have a democratic and co-owned internet, as opposed to something that's sort of being handed over to us by these behemoths. So,
and Jack Dorsey, he knows that he announced Web 5. So he thinks Web 3 is over. I mean, it had its run. It's here for a couple of weeks, but Web 5 is going to be the best of Web 3. It's going to be the best of Web 2. Put them together. We know that Jack's good at math. Web 5 is here. So, I mean, that's also, it just adds to kind of this fluff, right? It adds to what is real, what is not. Where is the best talent, the best capital, and the best momentum moving towards? Because that's what actually becomes real. And I will say that Web3, I think, is directionally correct, just like the internet was in 2000. But we need technology to catch up, and we need consumer behaviors to catch up, and they just haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, next big term in your bio, the metaverse.
The metaverse, that's a fun one. In the most simplistic way to define it, it's the embodied internet. And what does that really mean? It means the internet as we know, we sit behind a desktop or we have our mobile phones, but the embodied internet is to then step inside the internet, right? It's having your virtual avatar walking around. Again, that's the utopian vision of what Mark Zuckerberg and a lot of, tech giants want the metaverse to be, this virtual space. But the reality is the metaverse is already here, and it's been anchored in gaming. And what I mean by that, 3.3 billion gamers worldwide, 180 billion in revenue. When Travis Scott or Ariana Grande have a concert inside Fortnite, and you get over 12 million people to come at 2:00 on a Saturday to watch a concert in a video game. I mean, that is a metaverse. That is a shared experience, people together in a virtual environment, all watching this concert together. So the idea of all wearing headsets, hanging out in this embodied internet as the metaverse, I don't think that's totally real. But if you look to gaming and some of these nascent digital platforms, the metaverse is very much real.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic probably accelerated all of that, of course, because we needed safe spaces to gather and connect and build relationships. And I definitely saw it in my young children who were 9 and 11 when the pandemic started. And they spent so much time showing me the outfits that they were creating in their games and the homes that they were building and the amusement parks. So all the things that sort of they would have experienced in the physical world, they learned how to create for themselves in a virtual world because they couldn't get out in the physical world. And it's just such a powerful accelerant for all of this, it feels like.
And I will say that's the key of gaming is that the way gaming used to be is a game designer would make the game, we would all play it, and then the new game would come out. But to your point, there's now games where you can create the Minecrafts, the Roblox, even the clothing you can wear in Fortnite. And when you give that creative power to kids, to gamers, then they're building their own worlds. They're building their own virtual living rooms that people can come and hang out in. So it is amazing. And you're totally right. COVID was an absolute accelerant. But, as that kind of dissipated, it didn't just go down, it's continuing to go up. And you're right, for them, that's the virtual living room they want to hang out in.
Yeah, absolutely. And my kids actually never have played passive games that other people created. They've only played the ones where they are the world creators. And I think once you know you have that power, why would you go anywhere else? So, okay, AI.
Artificial intelligence. Okay, this one is probably the most robust because it has so many different facets that we could go into. But again, at a core, what AI really is it's trying to mimic the human brain. So it's basically trying to create processes and things that can speed up processes that a human would do, but much faster. So at a basic level, like a machine learning algorithm is taking data in and coming to a conclusion as quickly as it can. So this is, Netflix recommending you the right movie, Spotify recommending you, the right song. So we see AI everywhere. It's invisible. It's not something that's in front of us, but these content recommendation engines, the best route to go on Google Maps, all of these things are basically AI in a way, which is smarter than, 10 humans sitting with a map and drawing the best possible way. All it's doing is speeding up that process and giving you the best output as fast as possible. Then there's the more complex versions of artificial intelligence, and quickly we'll go into deep learning. So this is what we call a neural network when you think of autonomous vehicles, or Google's DeepMind, which for the game Go, one of the most complex games ever. It played millions of games until it taught itself to be the grandmaster and beat any of us mere humans. So deep learning is definitely more complex. We don't have to get too technical here, but that will power a lot of things like autonomous vehicles and many different things in our future.
Really, I think probably of the terms we've talked about, that's probably the most familiar concept and the most lived in at this point. And still, I think when you combine it with all of these other ideas, the potential gets really interesting and exciting. So, all right, next one, Internet of Things. We're familiar with this, hopefully, but quick recap.
And that's just all the devices, literally the tens of billions of devices that are all around us that are connected to the internet. So, the Nest thermostat, the Ring doorbell, your smart television, Apple Watch, Alexa, all these different things that are creating an interconnected web of computing, of what we call spatial computing in a way. So you can say something and lights can turn on, music can play. That's kind of how we define the Internet of Things. It starts with the smart home, which we have now, and eventually we'll move to, smart cities.
So wild. Last one, voice technology.
Voice technology, pretty simple. We all know and love Alexa. My 2-year-old loves Alexa. But this is the point of why voice technology is it permeates to any generation, because if you have the gift of language, you have mastered the UI, whereas mobile devices, you need to learn how to swipe, how to zoom, desktops, click, right? There's no learning curve when it comes to voice other than speaking. That's why a 3-year-old or a 93-year-old can use it. So when we see voice, it's really risen up. It exploded about 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, Alexa's like not even 7 years old at this point, I believe. But we see it really as a utilitarian function, right? Turning on music, turning off lights. We haven't fully had the trust there yet for Alexa to handle more emotional things, or to handle, my doctor's visit, or giving that types of information. But voice, again, an invisible, reductive technology that continues to rise. And once you have it, once you use Alexa to turn those lights off before you go to sleep, it's hard to ever wake up and go back to that switch again.
I think the understanding of all of these concepts becomes clearer and clearer with examples when we start to see the possibilities that can emerge from these technologies. And I know most of your work is focused on the future of fashion. So let's talk about how some of this comes to life in creating the future of fashion.
Well, fashion's it's an amazing world, right? And the possibilities that can come when we start talking about Metaverse and we start talking about Web3 or NFTs. But what really is, what is that digital or virtual complement that comes with a physical product? And especially in fashion, physical products, physical garments have just so much power. It's your clout. It's a signal out to the world. And what we're trying to figure out in that luxury fashion world is, where does that digital clout exist? Like, what does that come to life as, especially like Metaverse Fashion Week in Decentraland, where, you're not shackled to the human body of fashion. You could have particle effects. You could have wings growing out of you. So it really opens the aperture of what fashion could be in these worlds. And when you have technologies like augmented reality that lets you virtually try on things, it's limitless. So we're seeing a lot of piloting, trying new things in this space. Again, directionally correct, not perfect at the moment, but it shows the potential of the space.
Wow. And what do you see in the near future? Because so much of that I feel like is that is maybe 5 to 10 years out before the average consumer is interacting in that way. What do you see as being really pervasive over the next few years in terms of digital fashion and its influence on the average consumer's experience of tangible goods?
It's a great question. I think we always dive right to the future to say, okay, I'm going to have my virtual bags, my virtual clothing, my virtual closet. I'm going to be walking around like the book Ready Player One. But that's just
which my 9-year-old did, right? With her cute little Nike outfits that she purchased in Roblox.
Which is Roblox is a great use case we can talk about. But I always try to measure, when is it going to hit a critical mass of adoption, an iPhone level of adoption? And it will take time, right? So yes, there are those first adopters that are in there, in the Robloxes, in the Fortnites. And this is very real. Let's use Fortnite as an example. They have 797 different skins, clothings you can wear. The NFL skin, it made $50 million in revenue. That skin, that outfit, it didn't help you kill anyone faster or run any quicker or win the game any better. It was literally just digital clout. So virtual fashion is very much a real thing. To answer your question, where I think it is today to where it goes tomorrow, we have the data. We see on Snapchat, trillions of AR lenses are being used. People obviously love to augment their appearance. And I think that's the bridge to get us to a fully virtual fashion world of trying on different things, whether it's makeups or hats, and the technology continues to catch up. I work with QReal, and we're solving virtual watch try-on and configurators, and it's watches, it's necklaces, it's handbags. So I think it starts with this virtual trial of trying on these virtual twins of products, and then it's saying, what, if I post this on Instagram or TikTok, it's not that much different. It's virtually indistinguishable from the real product. I'll probably get the same clout, but for example, maybe I'd post the $12 Gucci AR sneaker versus the $2,000 real Gucci sneaker, because what is my audience going to know? They're going to think it's the same exact thing. So I think it starts with AR. For the first adopters, like your kids, they'll also buy the actual virtual fashion. And then, like most things with Maher's law, we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run, and then we underestimate its effect in the long run. So 5 or 10 years from now, when all of a sudden half of our budgets are going to virtual fashion, we'll say, how did we get here?
Right. Well, so a decade ago, really, as I was doing the math in my own head, a decade ago, we in the weight loss industry were looking at how do we help people visualize their progress and their change in their bodies by using some of the technology that was developed for the virtual closet. And nobody was really interested in the virtual closet, and nobody was really interested in seeing their body shift. And so I guess I just wonder, what's going to make this more enticing and easier? Because it's kind of kludgy, right? If I have to take a picture and send it to you and then wait for a response, it doesn't, I lose motivation before I get to that point.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, and I'll call this out, because I know I seem very optimistic about everything, and I'm very excited, but it is absolutely clunky. And a lot of the technology, specifically in fashion, has not caught up. So yes, watches can work, necklaces can work, makeup is wonderful. But let me tell you, we work with some of the cutting edge developers in the world. It is almost impossible for full body right now, for loose fitting garments. Loose fitting garments anything you see with full fashion in like AR, is usually puffy, right? Because it's easier to not actually show form fitting on the body. The technology has not caught up because every human body is so unique. And it's hard for, these garments to actually fall the way they should on a human body. So we find approximations or kind of cheats to kind of get past that by making something puffy or making something look like it's somewhat of an approximation. But to your point, eventually the rubber hits the road and a consumer says, this isn't actually what it looks like. And I actually would rather try it on myself. So that technology still needs to catch up. I mean, the wild thing is it's progressing and accelerating unbelievably fast, but we always get to that but why moment to say, are we going a little too fast? Is it just simpler to maybe get Stitch Fix and get a couple things to our house and try it on? So you're right. Until we can iron out some of these things, a lot of virtual fashion will be very, pilot programs, exploratory, and just not truly functional at a critical mass.
Yeah. So Dave, having worked with so many experienced strategists, what questions do you feel like they should be asking based on what Matt shared so far?
Matt, you have blown my mind. I have loved everything that you're describing. Back in 2015, we wrote a book called Digital Context. And in that book, we said that the evolution of channel strategy for companies would be from multi-channel to omni-channel to digital context. And what we meant by that is that the consumer would basically have one massive channel that they would be working in. We called it their personal data ecosphere. We called it the kind of the environment. And we really focused more on the Internet of Things. But what you've described for me is a world where you have not just the Internet of Things, but you have metaverses and people moving in and out of these different layers, different ways of doing different things, where they maybe choose gaming to help them accomplish aspirational jobs that they're trying to get done. So for example, I want to transform myself into someone who is powerful and capable and looks really, really good. And I'm going to go into my gaming experience, not so much for the head count that I can create, but for the experience of feeling empowered to have superpowers and so forth. So it becomes almost like digital context becomes your metaverse, your universe. I'm really interested in what you see as the impact that kind of thinking is going to have on companies and the way that they engage with their customers.
Great question, Dave. I think what happens is there's two sides of it. So there's the consumer, which we'll get to for a second. But yeah, for retailers, for brands, we construct these things to say we have our physical retail, and then we have digital, and we have our e-commerce, and we have all these touch points. But on the consumer side, it's all collapsed into one experience. And we're talking about CX. And this is because technology has accelerated so fast. And as humans, we just adapt to it. So again, 5 or 10 years ago, 2-day shipping was unbelievable, worth every penny of Amazon Prime. And then it's 2 days to 1 day to half a day to, Instacart working on its artificial intelligence machine learning algorithm to know how we can get you something in 15 to 20 minutes. And the problem with that is once you taste the nectar of how sweet that is, it's hard to then go back to 2 days or to a week. So I think you have this consumer that they don't care if it's physical, digital, wherever they want it, when they want it is what they want to get. And I think that's what the key of all digital is. And it's why we see a rise in social commerce and all the social platforms racing to add e-commerce there, because you never want to lose that click to buy wherever they are. It doesn't matter the medium. It doesn't matter the location. They need to be one click away from purchase. And that's a real existential threat to brands to say, do I want to give up my data to Meta or to TikTok? Do I want to own the customer experience? Do I want to own the loyalty and have the email? What am I going to sacrifice? So it's part of the reason we started M7. These are no longer just media or comms challenges. These are business transformational challenges. So it's a great question. And I think it ends with, the medium is the message. We go back to old school 100 years ago. no matter where you
Marshall
are, that's
McLuhan.
where it is. And I think, yeah, Marshall McLuhan, exactly, the godfather of communication. Like TikTok, you make the great point of like, there was whole TikTok resumes where people were applying for jobs through quick 60-second videos because that was the medium that they were empowered and they were confident in. And even though it seems so crazy for a Gen X or a boomer or millennial to say, that's how you're doing your resume. I mean, they packed thought and creativity into 60 seconds, much better than a cover letter or a CV would. So it always goes back to what is the medium, no matter what it is, that's where the message really lives.
Well, yeah, and
I
you've
love
got me
that.
thinking too, Dave, about the science behind mental rehearsal, or even Amy Cuddy's work around power poses and how people can go into these identities and into these worlds, and puff themselves up and ready themselves for whatever superpower they want to embody in a real virtual or a real physical world.
Yeah, we've been talking about superpowers now for a number of years, and the importance of superpowers to the way that experienced strategists think about what the consumer is trying to do. What I'm coming away from this session is, people, you have got to get on the superpower bandwagon, because the future of channel strategy is you just jump into whatever digital channel that you can jump into, and all of a sudden you're completely embodied in new capabilities, new ways of seeing yourself. And I think experienced strategists really need to catch up with that idea. I also like this idea. We've spent a lot of time talking about data experience design, where the focus is on designing the data to support the job the customer wants to get done, instead of thinking about the way that most companies do. They tend to think about data management, data aggregation, where you're working to kind of make things secure and stable and look across. What we've been arguing is that no, you need to figure out what the consumer wants to do